beneath the facade. That's what we're going to talk about today, facade, the mask. We're wearing masks. We all wear masks. We are some insecure people, probably most of us on this planet. And even those of us that have sort of projected themselves, in leadership and have done great things, oftentimes we're behind a mask. We're operating behind a mask, and this is what we want folks to see, and we begin to operate in that. And sometimes it's just like our wives or maybe our husbands. Those are the folks that know who we really are, our children, of course. Well, especially our wives and our husbands. Sometimes, of course, we put the facades before our children as well. But we're going to talk about behind the facade, because facades are fine if we need them. In places of responsibility, in places where we have to function. It's necessary. It's necessary to put on those shades and put on that mask so we can do the things that need to be done. But there are also times as well that facades sort of harm us and harm people around us. And as we begin to harm people around us, eventually, that old karma thing, that what goes around comes around thing, you reap what you sow thing, oftentimes when we harm people, it often comes back to bite us, okay? So that's what we're going to talk about, these facades. So there are times we need facades. There are good times to have a facade, that mask before us, so we can accomplish great things that need to be accomplished. But there are other times we walk into sort of hypocrisy, and we sort of harm people along the way to keep up this mask, to keep up this facade, to feed into this image of ourselves that we're projecting. It's very different. It's very important for us not to lose sight of who we really are. So it's one thing to have this mask, like on Halloween, you have to wear a mask out there, and that's what folks do. But it's cool because you know who you are behind that mask. But the unfortunate thing is that if you leave that mask on long enough, you might very well begin believing that you are that projected image, what that mask is reflecting, okay? And sometimes it is a harsh reality to find out that you're not, okay? We had a situation, during the slave trade. And so, the slaves were, they were prisoners prior to being turned over to the white folks when they were brought to this land and other lands. That you had warring tribes and warring nations, in Africa. Just because they were all black, they weren't all part of the same group. A lot of folks think that sometimes, Man, I remember I might be in another country, So, hey, I'm from Dayton, and whatever. Somebody asks if I know somebody. You're from Ohio, do you know Joe Blow or whatever? But so you had warring nations and warring tribes in Africa that would go to war, go into battle, and they would take prisoners and they would have slaves. And so when the Europeans came to Africa, they offered money for people. So what these tribes would do is they would just sell their slaves, their prisoners of war, to these slave traders. But then, it came to be a very lucrative business. And so in time, you would have certain blacks just going around finding other black folks, to being hired by the Europeans to round up a bunch of Africans, it wouldn't matter what tribe they belonged to, and sell them to these Europeans, okay? Capitalism. Entrepreneurism, okay? And so you find everybody isn't like that. Everybody isn't unscrupulous. Some people have ethics and morality and not always willing to sell folks out just because it's financially beneficial. But of course, in that time and in this time, come on, Judas, right, sold Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, right? So you've always, from the beginning of time, even until now, I'm sure in the future, you'll always find people that will victimize other people to make a buck, okay? And so you would have those Africans that would make deals, contract deals with the European slave traders, that they would bring them Africans. And so I was reading this one book chronicling this story of the slave trade, and they were speaking of this particular African that was just doing that. He was the contractor. Contract help to go out and bring a bunch of Africans, sell them to these European slave traders. And that African would then ride the boat, with these Africans to the New World. Just in case there was some communication that needed to happen, he could communicate with these African slaves and the European slave traders. He was like the middleman. And so he would go along on the trip from Africa to the New World. And there's one particular story, told the story of this particular, African contractor, that had these slaves and brought them to the New World. But when they got to the New World, instead of getting paid by the slave traders, he was just thrown in with a bunch of them, because as far as the slave traders were concerned, this was just another black face that we can get paid for. So on the whole trip, from capturing the Africans to being the intermediary, the middleman, the spokesman for the Africans, to let the slave traders know, what was going on, this particular African felt he was something special. But when he got to the New World, he recognized he was nothing special at all. He was just another black face, and he was thrown in there with a lot of them to be sold, to the highest bidder. But it was very interesting. When he was thrown in with the regular slaves, who of course knew who he was, they killed him. So he reaped what he had been sown in that whole trip. And so he had a facade that he was something different, only to find out later, to his heart, the harsh reality, that in the eyes of everybody else, he was no different than the people that he thought he was better than, okay? And so that's an example of sometimes that facade. How sometimes we can buy into the facade. We can forget who we really are, having bought into the facade that we're lost. We don't really know who we are. Sort of like the old joke about, the woman who dyed her hair this color, dyed her hair that color, and dyed her hair for so many years she had forgotten what color her hair really was. And I know that's unbelievable, it's not realistic, but sort of that understanding is, if you buy into this facade for so long, sometimes we forget. You can take kids from regular neighborhoods. You can take kids listening to all this gangster stuff, gangster music, gangster this, gangster that. I've seen it in the neighborhoods. They're not gangster, they're not tough. About 5 or 7 years of listening to that stuff, they become that. They begin acting out, and they begin doing gangster things. Now, as many of you know, I functioned in juvenile detention ministry for like 17 years, going in there every week, talking to these young people, these kids that were gangsters on the street. Then they get locked up, and reality would set in. They'd just be crying. I want to go home. I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to get time. I'll be good. I'll change. This is my wake-up call. It really was a wake-up call. Because that's what it took. It took jail. It took the reality of the karma. It took reality of what was going around, coming around, to snap you back to the reality of who you are, who you really are, beneath the facade. You don't want to do that anymore because you know that's not who you are. But it's funny that they get released. They'd be released from jail. They'd luck out, and they get out. Or they just do a little bit of time and get out. And the religion that they found and the changes and all the good things they were going to do that they promised their mother they were going to be when they got out. Didn't take long before they revert right back to that facade. And then the next time you see them in jail, they're crying again. As they talk about finding God in jail. So many folks do. And many Christians and religious folks think that that's not legitimate. They just found God because they were in jail. No, that is legitimate. That's because a mask was yanked away, and the real part of them was standing there recognizing that there's something wrong with the life that they were living. That's why you find certain folks going to jail and getting their college degrees in prison. But they wouldn't have done it on the outside. Why? Because their facade was not allowing them to do so. So they get inside for 15 years and come out with a degree. Something that they would have never gotten had they not gotten locked up. Because it was only after they were locked up the facade was ripped away. And they were recognizing how much time they were wasting in this condition. They got busy. And as well, when we look into this political situation going on. I think as African Americans, we especially have to be careful not to buy into what everybody else has bought into. We need not buy into the facade. We need to look at this political situation today that we've been watching from on the outside. Before we had an African American president, we've been Republicans and we've been Democrats. But the reality deep inside, we knew we really weren't a part of this thing. We were just voting, exercising our right to vote, whoever would benefit us the best. Never in a million years considering there would ever be an African American president. But then Barack Obama came along. What a blessing, what a joy to see something like that we could have never dreamed could have happened to one of us, but it did. this, we see a whole lot of stuff coming out of the woodwork after this. We see so many black Republicans. We begin really to identify ourselves now with the parties, with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, African Americans. And I'm afraid that it's been taking us away from the reality of who we really are. See, the Democratic Party is just another mask. The Republican Party is another mask. These are simply masks that we have, when there wasn't an African American president, we had the ability to see the difference between the parties and ourselves. But we began to buy into the Democrat, buy into the Republican so much that has become a real part of us. We need to begin to not lose ourselves in that. We see it all the time. We see it in the other races that function in these political in the political parties. How they bought so much into the facade, they don't care what their particular party espouses. They'll buy into it simply because they're a Democrat or they're a Republican. I think we find African Americans today, we have a little bit different perspective. As we see this African American as president, we support him because we recognize that there is something that we have in common with this man that is not part of the facade. The facade is the political party. The facade may be how much money you have in your bank and the person that you believe that you believe that makes you. But the reality is, we are African Americans in this nation. We've been second-class citizens for many years. We're coming up out of that, but not to get so entwined in the political process that we somehow lose sight of who we really are. We are African Americans, and that is the reality. And is always the reality. I saw it recently, because you've seen it. You see, there may have been 50% or so of the American population that voted Obama in office, but that means there's another 50% or just about of the population that doesn't like him. And you've seen the venom, and you've seen the name calling, you've seen the lies and the unfair treatment and the no cooperation, unprecedented no cooperation within the government simply because there is an African American president. I mean, there have always been Democrats and there have always been Republican presidents, and to some extent there was cooperation, between the parties to get things done, which is their job. But it was like day one, Obama came in office, it was like, we ain't helping, we just trying to get him up all out of there. And it's really very interesting to see the chain of events that have happened that have been leading all the way up to this election. Very interesting. Very interesting. And so it's not really about a political party. To me, it's not a political party which is right or wrong. There are political parties that are preferences, that's fine, but let's not get so entwined in the political party that we lose sight of who we really are as human beings and as African Americans. And what I mean by that is, even when we look at the Civil Rights Movement, even with great movements within the United States, I mean, I know there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and suffering, and sacrifice by a lot of people, but the powering force of the movement was the honesty, was the integrity, was being on the side of right. And that side of right is that won the Civil Rights Movement. That side of right is what won the civil liberties and all those good things from people who deserved it because they were on the side of right. But when you begin embracing the side of wrong, when you begin lying and cheating in order to attain your goal, no, the end does not justify the means. We have to be on the side of right. As African Americans, we've always been on the side of right. So I'm not suggesting an African American be a Democrat, and I'm not suggesting an African American be a Republican, but the African American must embrace truth, must embrace right, being on the side of right. And so when you begin to embrace yourself simply in the party, and if there are lies being told, embrace the lies. If there are mistruths or misrepresentations being presented, embracing those and claiming those, don't do that. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, recognize the path that we've been on in this nation all of these years has been a path that we've been sighted on the side of right, on the side of good, on the side of justice. That's what I'm suggesting today. This isn't a partisan message, because the reality is, for there to be true freedom, for there to be true equality for African Americans in this nation, there has to be Republican African Americans, there has to be Democrat African Americans, and independent African Americans. We can't say, because it's not true freedom, it's not true liberty if we say no to being African American, you have to be a Democrat, or you have to be a Republican, or you have to be an independent, or whatever. What I'm suggesting is, for there to be true freedom, true liberty, you have to be whatever you feel like being, but whatever it is, let it be honest. And let there be an integrity that only truth is embraced, whatever ideology you are prescribing to. And that truth, to me, beneath the facade. See, what is the facade? If a facade is a mask, if a facade is something that's untrue, that's being projected, whether, we think it for the good and we think it's for the bad, in reality it's not honest and it's not real. So if the facade is a mask that decides what the reality is, then beneath the facade is truth. Beneath the facade is honesty. And so dishonesty is a facade. Because dishonesty, the reality behind dishonesty and a lie is that you know it's dishonest and you know it's a lie. Now you might be good at presenting it, good at projecting it, but the reality is you know it's a lie. If you know it's a lie, then it's a mask. And beneath that facade is the truth. And all I'm suggesting in this message is that we need to gravitate back beneath the facade, beneath the mask, beneath that deceitful projection, and begin to embrace truth and good. It's not about an ideology or a political point of view. Be a Republican, be a Democrat, be an independent, be a Christian, be a Muslim, be an atheist, whatever it is you choose to believe, but let it be honest. Let it be that place beneath the facade. That's where we need to be as African Americans in this, because we're not done yet. We still have a long way to go. If Obama becomes, in my opinion, if Obama becomes president this time, which it looks like, he just might be with all this stuff going on, the chain of events happening. But if he does become president again, and then he's not president, how many years do you think it's going to be before there's another African American president? Probably not in any of our lifetimes. This is it. Right now, that roulette wheel is on the black right now. It just might be on the black for a couple more revolutions. But after this, it's going to be a long time before that thing lands on black again. So I'm saying is, so we just need to know that we haven't. I think we might be on a particular more positive trajectory, direction, angle, whatever. But as African Americans, we still have a long way to go. We have to begin making right decisions. We have to begin putting down the alcohol, putting down the weed, putting down the drugs, putting down the lottery tickets, putting down all those things that are sapping up our potential, whether it's our economic potential, our financial potential, our emotional potential. Quit cheating on our spouses, quit doing things that we're not supposed to be doing. This is what I tell my kids, this is what I raise my daughter, and every day is like, honey, you always have to do the right thing. It may not be easy. Everybody may not be with you, but you have to do what you believe is the right thing. Now, I'm not even trying to this particular junction in her life, I am telling her what the right things are. But as you begin to get older, you're going to be presented with all kinds of things that Daddy didn't tell me this was right or wrong, that you're going to have to make determinations yourself. But when you recognize that there was something right, that's something that's honest, something that's not wrong, something that's not exploiting other folks, making other people suffer, the right way to go, we have to go make the right choices. We have to do the right thing. African Americans, we need to do that. Because the reality is there is this thing called karma, as we discussed in the last message. That what goes around does in fact come around. And that's why we've been suffering. We can't blame most of this stuff, our ills, on the white man. We can if we want to, because it'll make us feel better, but it's that same old thing about not taking responsibility. Now, I don't like it when white folks tell black folks that we don't take responsibility, but but the reality is we don't, okay? I mean, how is it with your kid at home when they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, and you check them and they're always making excuses? Doesn't that tick you off just a little bit? Well, come on, we need to do that too. Our ills, we gotta stop blaming our ills on other folks. If we know that we have done everything right that we were supposed to do, who has done that? Nobody. But if we have, then we can say, it's not my fault. But if you can begin to pinpoint things that you have done that weren't quite right, you can't blame your situation on anybody. You will, most of us do, but we can't. And we have that detention sometimes. I have these kids, and just because you didn't do that thing, and you got jammed up for something that you didn't do, and those kids in detention would tell me that, Mr. Jarvis, I really didn't do this. I said, well, that thing that you did that you didn't get popped for? Well, this is karma. Okay, you may not have guessed, but maybe that's what this is for. You didn't get caught for the thing you did do, so you got jammed up for this thing you didn't do. So really, you're still getting jammed up for what you did that wasn't right. Okay? So you can't even blame this on somebody else, even if you were set up, if you have done other things wrong that you've gotten away with. You see what I'm saying? And what I'm suggesting today is, at this particular point in your life, you need to stop doing wrong. I'm serious. Nobody can really, let's be real now, nobody can stop doing everything wrong. Who doesn't do anything wrong? I mean, I get a little heavy on the pedal sometimes when I'm driving, I have to admit. But I'm just suggesting that we really need to just stop doing wrong. Whether it's like breaking the law, doing things we shouldn't, or even being bad influences in front of our children. Some of my greatest changes in life. How about this? There's a show on TV, Family Guy. Man, that cartoon kind of wrong, kind of nasty, I guess. But it's funny to me. That's like one of my favorite programs, Family Guy. It's just ridiculous, but it's still not quite right. About a year ago, I'm downstairs in the basement, and I'm watching Family Guy, and I'm cracking up. My little girl, she always likes to sneak up on me. She came downstairs real quiet and just sat there. Now, she only sat there for about 30 seconds or 45 seconds. She comes around, what's that? Looking at the TV, hearing something I think she shouldn't have heard, and recognizing it's a cartoon. I say, honey, it's just a cartoon for adults. And man, I'm feeling like really guilty. And I made her a promise. Later on that night, I said, honey, I'm going to make you a promise. Daddy will never watch that program again. Now that's rough, man, because I made that promise to my little girl. Or sometimes I'm at home by myself, and I want to turn on, watch that silly cartoon. But I can't, because I promised my daughter that I wouldn't. Sometimes we need to begin to make changes, even if it goes against, every fiber of what you want to do for your pleasure, because our children are watching. I shudder to think, what if my daughter had snuck downstairs and hid behind the couch for a half an hour and listened to that whole program? You know the kind of things are on those programs, what I'm talking about. Our kids are watching us. And so I feel that I was able to, it was only like 45 seconds or so, but I feel blessed that that's all the exposure she got. I had to quick on my feet and make that promise to her. I'd never watch that program again, and I haven't. We need to change, if not for ourselves, for our children. Because they are watching us. And whether you think they do or not, they worship you, they idolize you, and they're becoming just like you. And they will be just like us when they get older, except maybe ratchet certain character traits up just a little bit greater than what they are with us. Some of the good ones, and unfortunately some of the bad ones. So I'm just suggesting today, there are even the whole Family Guy thing. I wasn't raised like that. I've been Martin Jarvis all these years, but Marty wasn't raised like that. Behind the facade, man, we have been functioning behind certain facades for so long. Some of us drink a lot. Some of us smoke a lot of weed, or cussing, or cheating, doing things we shouldn't be doing. That's not who you were raised to be. That's not who you are. And some of us, even if that's how you were raised to be, then that is a facade that was created early in your life. And you have to seek to find who you are behind that facade. What I'm closing today quietly and quickly is meditation. You need to meditate. Take some quiet time. Away from all the distractions in life. Away from the DVDs and videos and TVs and radios and CDs and iPods and MP3s and computers and all these things to distract us. And take some time alone and just be quiet and meditate. Begin to listen to that still small voice, that voice within you. There's all kinds of thoughts and good thoughts and things that need to be hashed out that are hidden deep within you, but we're so occupied We're so distracted with the realities and the pullings of life that we can't even hear that still small voice within us that's screaming to us. We have these funny dreams sometimes. We need to recognize our dreams are something that subconscious part of us that never goes to sleep is still trying to communicate to us in our knockdown, in our sleeping time. We can't comprehend it then. But that voice is always speaking. I'm saying when you're awake, get up in the morning, early in the morning. Take 10, 15, 20, 30, 45 minutes of just quiet time by yourself, not saying a word. Just listen. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised how wise you are inside. For real. Well, anyway, I gotta go. I do want to thank you once again for joining me and listening. And I want to invite you to listen again. You take care.